Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with digital marketing trainer and author Matt Bailey. He brings marketing know-how along with extensive sales experience. His training merges sales and marketing goals to produce a more dynamic, efficient, and accountable strategy. Since 1998, he has presented at thousands of companies, conferences, and workshops. He is one of the highest-rated presenters worldwide for his ability to communicate complex information in a practical, humorous way. When he is not training, he resides in a quiet rural area of Ohio with his wife of 20-plus years and his 4 daughters. He is a beekeeper and enjoys reading with a good cup of coffee. Enjoy this interview.
Okay, Matt, hey, thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. I appreciate the invitation.
You bet. So I know that you're a marketing trainer and author, and in your capacity with what you do for a living, the last couple of years has been quite strange on Earth with the pandemic. How did you survive COVID, and how did that change the way that you not only approach your business life, but just life in general?
Well, it was, I can say that I had a fairly interesting and probably unique experience in that as a trainer, I work from home originally, and I, develop a lot of content here, then I go out on the road and present it. So the biggest change right away was all of the training engagements on the calendar went away. And so initially, I'm wondering what's going to happen. Well, then it didn't take long, probably a few weeks before everyone started asking for online training. Then let's move this to virtual. And so that took over very quickly. But what I was really surprised about was the demand. The demand of new clients, new companies approaching me, asking me for both virtual training as well as creating training programs for their company that would be hosted on their internal training servers, and so their employees could continue to train and get better. And it's one of those things that I've noticed that whenever there's been a recession, whenever there's been a major time of economic uncertainty, training always is in demand. And so from that, I probably have been the busiest I've ever been in my entire life, to answer your question.
Well, that's a good thing. And I'm curious, before we get to the nuts and bolts of what you do, let's kind of boil it down to elementals here. If you're right now transported in front of a group of grade school kids, let's say third graders, you're at career day, and one of the kids looks up and says, "What do you do for a living, and how are you qualified to do it?" How would you answer that?
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. I'll give you kind of the stock answer. I put businesses at the top of Google. That's what I tell my mother too, because she still has trouble explaining it to people. And how I started by building my own websites years ago and learning what works in search engines and what doesn't. And then from there, just continually added new skills like advertising on search engines, like social media, like content marketing. And you just continue to learn as you're doing it, which is probably the best type of qualification you can have.
So it's probably moms can operate a lot mentally like a third grader sometimes, right?
When it comes to technology and describing what their kids do, I always ask people when I'm teaching, like, how many of you do tech support for your parents? And I always kind of laugh at the hands that go up, because that's part of the deal is we are, in this realm of where the kids are teaching us sometimes and we're teaching the parents.
Absolutely. It's definitely a carousel of helping each other out. So when you were a kid, what did you have a dream of becoming when you grew up?
Man, great question. I think originally it was like a veterinarian. As I got into high school, I think I became more aimless. I had no idea, but I was always fascinated with advertising. My mom would joke that I watched commercials more than I watched shows. I always was fascinated with that. And so as I got into university, I became really more interested in persuasion, in rhetoric, in journalism, and what does it take to understand people and persuade them. So that was always at the forefront of an interest of mine. And so when I encountered the internet in the mid to late 90s, it seemed to be that this was something that was made for me. I felt completely at ease at home in the technology, and it just transformed from there.
You know what I've always been blown away by? Television and cable and satellite, all of this has made just thousands of channels. How has nobody, especially Ted Turner, not come up with the idea of something simply called the commercial network? And they play blocks and themes. Like Super Bowl weekend, it's all Super Bowl ads. Holidays.
Right.
I mean, you could totally do that. So somewhere along
absolutely.
somewhere along the line, I haven't talked to the right person, or if all you're doing is running ads, I would think that you would have to make a lot of money. You wouldn't really have to worry about residuals, but I don't know. I don't know network TV, but how cool would that be to just sit down and watch commercials all the time?
Especially the vintage, you could have different decades, you could have different products, absolutely. And you could make a case that, advertising a couple decades ago was really good.
Yeah.
Now we kind of watch the Super Bowl and it's kind of the same trope. It's the celebrity, it's the joke or something like that. But the really creative stuff, and maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me that, is kind of the grumpy guy, looking at everything saying it was better back in the day. But I just seem to remember when that was the primary channel, brands put more attention to it.
Absolutely. They certainly did. So talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and kind of how you got a motivation. I mean, what you're doing is obviously you're driven to do something, much larger than yourself. How did you kind of get this motivation to do what you do?
Wow. So I'll give you a little bit of my background, and that may help. So probably the best way to describe how I'm doing what I'm doing is my father was a pastor and my mother was a teacher. And so I grew up being very comfortable in front of people, being around people who could speak very well, who could communicate well, and that affected me. I think that enabled me to learn how to communicate effectively, and probably the most significant feedback that I get from people is that I'm able to take very complex, very technical concepts and make them not just understandable, but practical. Like, I can explain, here's why you need to do it, and here's how to do it in very simple steps. And so I think that background, that just, I think, opened up a love for communication in many different forms.
So sometimes we're only as good as those that we admire and look up to, and I'm curious, who has been a mentor or a role model for you?
Oh, I would say first, it was my father. I admired his ability to prepare, to create, and deliver teaching. And then later on, I think I was, in between high school and college, and he wanted me to go get sales training. And, in my mind, and this will date a few people, I'm thinking of Herb Tarlick and WKRP in Cincinnati, the tacky sales guy. And I'm thinking, I don't want sales training. I don't like what that's all about. And he said, you don't understand. Sales is about understanding people and helping them find what they want. It just so happens that you many times have what they need. And so then he offered to pay for it. So that made the decision. I went and got sales training, and that was, again, one of those events that really triggered a love for understanding, for persuading, for communicating. And from that, it affected how, I was always good at sales, and I always seemed to get put into those roles. But one of my earliest bosses, I was in real estate. He was the broker. And I was, young 20s, and I started working for him. He kind of took me under his wing, and I learned so much, not just about sales, but about negotiation, about working with people, about dealing with, uncomfortable situations or bad news. He taught me so much, and that was probably one of, he goes down in my mind as the best boss I ever had. And when I started my agency, I started it by making a list of all the things he did that made that experience so special, so that I would remember and that I would be able to do those same things when I had my agency.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who would it be? Who would you love to meet?
Wow. Oh, wow. There's so much going on right now. Yeah, it's so much happening. Man, that is, I think I would like, I politically, I don't know where anyone is, but honestly, I would like to sit down with Biden, and just talk through what is it that motivates you to make these decisions. What is it that drives you? And I guess I'm going to be a homer and just say I'd like to talk to our own president and just get a sense of what he's about.
So, every day you have all of these things that you do that you're looking forward to doing. Very simply put, what is it that motivates you? What do you look forward to every day you wake up?
Honestly, I love training people. It wakes me up at night putting together methods of training or teaching, whether they're activities, whether they are assignments for people to do. What motivates me is when someone gets that light bulb moment and they understand, here's how I can market my business better, here's how I can market myself better. Ultimately, when I'm training people, even if it's through a different company, what I'm giving them the tools to do is empowerment. It's empowerment to take something internally and run with it. They can create something of their own. They can create it for the business they're working for. They can become a content creator. This is what I love about digital media and digital communications, is that these are skills that span an entire framework of empowerment, that wherever you are, whoever you are, in almost any industry or role, these skills enable you to communicate better, to produce better content. And so I love it when people get new jobs, when people get promotions, when people go out on their own, or even they're able to establish their business. That's what excites me, is when I can transfer that information and I see someone take it and run with it.
So we're clearly from the same generation, I think, and I've been in IT for, going on 20 years now, and I was a part of that 90s revolution where you just got kind of grandfathered in. I was doing marketing and newsletters, and they're like, hey, we got these servers, and, we're older dudes that want to make as much money as possible, and we don't really want to hire IT people because it's expensive, so let's have you do it. So I went on ahead and we did it, and right, and then I've kind of gotten to that point where that's what I do. I'm a technician now, and I've seen all these revolutions. I remember when Google was really kind of up and coming, I'm like, they're going to start making machines and do all kinds of different things, and now, I have Google Fiber in my house, and there's so many things they've diversified. So I think my question to you is this. With what you see the way we've evolved, we've gone from phone books to a phone in our pocket that can contact anything that you want in the history of humankind. Where do you see digital marketing and businesses and the way that we communicate? How do you see that getting easier and more powerful and more accessible to everybody?
That's interesting, because it seems to be more tied to the device itself. And so, right now, I'm on my iPhone, but the iPhone hasn't changed much. With increased bandwidth, it enables a few more functions, But it's almost like you mentioned the phone book, that was a medium, and it wasn't until the device started changing, it became untethered from the wall. Then you were able to take it out in public. You had the little suitcase phone, at some point. But by and large, what we have now hasn't changed for I want to say we're going on almost 20 years. I've got a little shelf with my iPhone 1 and my 3. I think I went all odd numbers. But it enabled a level of freedom and communication. And what has caught up are apps and the bandwidth to run a lot of those things and the GPS functions. But I think we're kind of tethered to the hardware. And until the hardware shifts. Now, you mentioned Google, and the Google Glass is probably something that would be the next major shift that would replace all of these items and put it into a smaller, more wearable format. I think when we see the next hardware shift, that's when we're going to see the next communication shift as well.
That's fascinating. I totally agree. Yeah, we are definitely at a point where, it's really kind of tethered to this technology. I mean, that's what everybody does to adapt to it, whether it was Windows or it was, an Apple iOS or OS. You're totally right. When you look back on your life and where you're at right now, what's been one of the best, customer fan letters, so to speak? One of the best responses that you've gotten from the work that you've done?
Oh, wow. It's probably every week I get someone who is so thankful for the courses. I've got courses on LinkedIn. I also have courses on my own training site. And so probably weekly I get people just saying, thank you. I get it now. I understand it. It's really special when they tell me I applied it and here were the results. And they give me, here's the analytics that showed this changed because I did this. And just hearing their excitement, that's the best fan letter stuff. Like I said, I love hearing when people get promotions or anything like that. I'm trying to think if there's one in particular. But it's one of those things that I tend to see weekly with students and even in person in training, getting that. I can't pick out just one at this point, but those are the kinds of things I see.
Yeah, I get it. So let's say tonight you have a dream and your younger self appears in your 20s, and you run into that younger person, and you can give it a piece of advice based on what you've learned throughout your life. And it's not about regret. It's about dispensing wisdom of what you've learned over the years. What would you tell your younger version? What would be the piece of advice you would give him?
Wow. That's a hard question because I feel like, not that I've made the right decisions, but all of these events from my youth have kind of brought me here. So would I do anything different? No. What I would encourage, and this is something that I encourage anyone getting into business, especially younger people, is one of the biggest things that I did that made me who I am, that brought me where I am, and affected my business personally and organizationally, was networking. Getting involved with networking groups, getting to know people in different industries, getting to know your local area, who does what, where they are, and being willing to help them out, offer advice. Don't feel like everything has to be a sale, but establishing very early myself in the local community, in these lead groups and networking groups, gave me the confidence to go out more nationally. When I would go to a conference or something like that, I just approached people and asked, can I buy you a cup of coffee and get 30 minutes of your time? And just getting to know people, learn who people were, and then network from there. That I attribute that as probably one of the biggest stepping stones to where I am today.
It's interesting. Where are you located?
I am in Canton, Ohio, the Football Hall of Fame city.
Oh, cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I was cheering on the Indians the other day. all of that suffering and pain that the Cleveland fans have gone through, it's just got to end at some point. It has to. It's so hard to watch those MLB showcases where it's like, yeah, they had a champagne show, and it's like, man, I understand LeBron and I understand that happened, but for baseball fans, something karmically has to happen.
I'm not originally from Ohio, so that's just funny to me.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, the reason why I wanted to get kind of a regional context based on what you just said there is that, you know, my bread and butter is I have a jazz radio show, and I moved right as the pandemic, before we knew what was going on, January of 2020, I moved to Lee Summit, Missouri, and that's the home of Pat Metheny. So when I mentioned that, especially, so when I would mention that, people would always bring up Pat Metheny. Always had a story. I mean, I could write a book based on all these stories. But this is the thing about Pat that's interesting, based on what you said. There was a book that came out probably a year ago from a local author that really preened into his early years before he moved on and got to be kind of the person that he is now, which is like massive in the world of jazz. Mm-hmm. And his whole thing was go out, and he would always tell people around him, go out and play with as many people as you can. Wherever you're at, play all the time. Play all the time. And then more than that, I've heard all of these stories from people where they've invited him to places, or they've ran into him, or they've won this contest and met him, and they say that he's always gracious and good and kind, just like you're saying, having a coffee, or just doing it because you do it. Like, Pat doesn't need anything in return. Pat is a downbeat Hall of Famer. He's going to be one of the most famous people that ever came out of Kansas City, and that's not a light statement because Charlie Parker came from here. But at the end of the day, you know, he's one of those guys that genuinely has said, do everything you can do, and just, he exudes being a cool cat. He just is the guy that, like, talks to all the younger players, and like one guy told me a story where he was up in Boston and he was going to the Berklee College of Music, and he said that someone in his class, they have a group that would meet, said, I'm trying to get Pat Metheny to come up, and everybody laughed and howled in laughter, and they're like, that's great, yeah, let's try it. But she couldn't get him because he was on tour, but he told her, when I come back, I'll do it. He comes back, and he goes to this group. There's no real affiliation. It's just a group of musicians. He stayed until the very last question. So anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but it does epitomize. We're talking about a Hall of Fame caliber kind of guy that just does that, what you're saying. Because he just does. Yeah. That's who he is.
Absolutely. And it's, one of the things, and this is where understanding your community, giving back, building that reputation. One of the things that I have interns come through. I have some part-time workers come through, and many of them are just learning in the business. And one of their assignments is go find a local business that needs help. And so we have built websites and set up built websites for local companies where the owner doesn't know the first thing about this stuff. And we're not charging them. This is a learning experience for my employees. They're learning how to do this. They're learning what it takes to develop it, what it takes to start it, what it takes to program it and set all this stuff up, because they're going to need this. And so, one of them was, a local feed supplier. They don't know anything about this. And so it's a joy, it's a pleasure to be able to say, you know what, let us take care of that. Let us take care of that for you, and then when it's done, we're going to set you up on it. And it's one of those things that, we don't advertise, and we don't put it out there, and then we don't, you're the kind of the first person I've told that we do this. But it's one of those things that strengthens your ties in the community, and probably wouldn't be surprised at how much then comes back because of that. When not only you're working your way into the community, but like you said, when you're nice, when you're generous, when you are genuine, it comes back.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. And when you do know what you're doing, because I do have a background in HTML and web design, it doesn't take that long. I mean, you don't have to go through an excruciating amount like you would for a paid client, but if you get them up and going, you almost don't want to do too much because it's going to be too daunting for them. If you give them something like a tricycle to pedal, they're fine. It's like, good, I'm at least out on the digital world, and then you go from there. That's great. That's That's what should be happening in the world, because I've heard about those services where apps can connect people. Like one guy knows plumbing, one guy knows electrical, another guy can, do tech things. It's like if we would all just kind of figure out a way to do a bartering system based on human skills.
Right?
I mean, how wonderful would that be? Like, hey, dude, my carburetor, I think I need some help. All right, there you go. And I know how to do your OS, or I know how to do hardware, and there you go. You exchange good for good, and that would be an ideal way of doing it. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you lived your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow. Great questions, by the way. I love great questions.
Thank you.
I would just say I am a man who absolutely loves my family and feel completely amazed at where I am. I have been blessed. I can't be thankful enough for what I have been given. And so, no, I've got 4 amazing daughters, 3 of which are teenagers, one of which has left the home already, a wonderful wife. To me, a perfect evening is sitting in my backyard and watching my bees. That's kind of who I am. So,
I love it.
Even though, I'm out there training and traveling and talking to people, there's nothing better than watching a sunset from the backyard.
Well said. So for everything that you do as a trainer and an author, where can those that are listening right now find out more about you, what you do, and pick anything up that's involved in your world?
Absolutely. The center of everything I do is at sitelogic.com, and that's SITE, sitelogic.com. From there, you can access my podcast. It's called the Endless Coffee Cup Podcast, where we talk about marketing, technology, and culture. And also, I have courses there from my learning site about digital marketing, local business marketing, analytics. We're continually adding more and more courses to help people understand this digital media landscape. But SiteLogic is the central place where you can find me.
Beautiful, Matt. This has been great, man. Thank you for taking time out. Good luck with everything.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.